If you are a plumber in Canada who's trying to get their red seal, if you want to pass the first time, if you want to get good study hacks on how to pass, if you want to get insights from someone who has passed before, you are in the right place. I am a journeyman in Canada. I passed my red seal exam in November 2022. These techniques I'm about to show you I'm about to go through 25 questions and just show you my process of studying and learning and getting better at these practice questions. I've done over 600 practice questions in the last couple months, and that's like the first tip. Doing a lot of practice questions, and the ones you get wrong, study them over until you get them right, and then just repeating them and getting better and better at them. So into the 25 questions that I have here. You have to think about the actual test, the actual red seal exam. It is timed. You have 4 hours for 125 questions. So when you break it down, it's almost 2 minutes per question, and for 25 questions, it is 48 minutes. So I'm just going to take you through 25 questions here and just break them down. Question number 1. In a septic tank, there are blank chambers. How many chambers? 2, 3, 4, or 5. This question is simply you know it or you don't. The answer is 2. This is what it looks like. These are 2 different septic tanks. They're either the concrete one or the plastic one. They have 2 chambers. As you can see in this picture here, it has this outlet here. Water goes into the first chamber. Sediment falls to the ground. And once the water level gets high enough, it goes into the second chamber and then into the field. That's just how it works. That's question 1. Question 2, an automatic air vent begins to discharge more frequently than normal. The likely cause is what? Water in the system is flashing to steam. B, system velocity is too high. C, an increase in makeup water. D, expansion tank is empty. So it's obviously not A, water doesn't need to be flashing to steam for any reason in a water system, in a piping system for any reason. That's just an outlandish one. So that's like a process of elimination that you can just get rid of immediately, because you've probably never heard of that. Unless you're trying to get creative, you might think that's the right answer, but that's not the right answer. System velocity is too high. No, system velocity has nothing to do with an air vent discharging, but an increase in makeup water or an expansion tank is empty. The expansion tank is never gonna be empty. If it gets damaged somehow, like, it's just impossible unless you disconnect it from the system. So that's a way you can kind of eliminate them immediately. Now you might not know why I eliminated those, but that just comes with time and learning it. Like, once you hear me say it, and now you know it. So it's gonna be C, increase in makeup water. Because if there's more makeup water in the system, it needs to go somewhere, and it's either going to go into the expansion tank, and when the expansion tank is full or at pressure, it's going to go out an air vent. Question 3, when using copper tube for an underground venting system, the condition that must be adhered to is this. 4 different markings, and is it going to be turned up or down? The yellow markings of the tube must be turned up. That's A. B, the red markings of the tube must be turned down. C, the blue markings of the tube must be turned down. D, the green markings of the tube must be turned up. Again, process of elimination is things that make common sense. It's obviously not going to be turned down because there's just no point in that whatsoever. So the blue markings are out because it's pointing down. Why would you need to be pointing down? So like whenever things are underground, companies usually like to lay something over top of it so that if you're digging, you find the markings before you find the actual pipe, so you don't break it. You know, you can break the markings, just a little bit of ribbon, like caution tape, so that can be damaged, but you don't damage the pipe. So that's why it's going to be over top. So it's going to be any one of the other 3. Now, the answer is yellow, and that's just something you just have to know. Green, I've seen green underground before, over top of sanitary drainage lines. I've never seen red underground, but that is like caution tape or like danger tape. But the answer for this is going to be yellow. So just remember that. The statement that best describes a monoflow system is 3-pipe system, express return system, a gravity system, a 1-pipe system. So it's going to be one of those 3. And before I give the answer, I'm going to give some hints. Now, mono means 1. So something that can help you is learning the actual definition of words. So mono means one, and it's used as like a prefix to some words. For example, I'll give you some examples here. Carbon monoxide as opposed to carbon dioxide. Di is two, mono is one. Carbon dioxide is CO2, and carbon monoxide is CO. There's just one oxygen. Monologue, one person speaking. So this mono means one. Anyway, the answer is D. It's a one-pipe system. Question 5. On the discharge side of every positive displacement pump, a blank must be installed. Strainer, pressure relief valve, pressure regulating valve, or a solenoid valve. Now, one thing with positive displacement pumps, or pumps in general, is that there's going to be pressure. It's increasing pressure. It's pushing water somewhere. So whenever there's a pump, you have the danger of, if it's malfunctioning, it can increase pressure to an exceeding amount that can damage piping, can damage fittings, and everything else in the system. It'll mess up the system if it increases pressure to an unlimited amount. So that speaks to a pressure relief valve. Pressure regulating valve, that's like before the pump. Strainer, it doesn't make sense for a strainer to come on the discharge side of the pump. Discharge side means the water that's coming after the pump. A strainer is supposed to catch sediment and stuff, so it's not going to be that, because strainer should go before the pump. And then a solenoid valve is an electricity controlled valve. That's just kind of there with no context, so it's not that. So the answer is a pressure relief valve. On the discharge side of every positive displacement pump, a pressure relief valve must be installed. Number 6. A ceiling mounted air conditioner leaking condensate onto the ceiling could be caused by a dirty filter or insufficient trap seal depth of the condensate trap, not enough fall on condensate line, or indirect condensate waste not vented. So it's not going to be the dirty filter, because if you know anything about an air conditioning unit or HVAC at all, the filters are for air, no water involved in that. So the question is that it's leaking. What could be the cause? Insufficient trap seal depth of the condensate, just like a P-trap under a fixture. These units they always have a trap. The trap of water is basically it's just a pipe going like this, and going like that, and keep going. B is saying that it's not deep enough. C, not enough fall on drain line, so it's not sloping enough, which, by the way, could be the answer. Indirect condensate waste not vented. The answer is B, insufficient trap seal depth of the condensate. So essentially on this one, the water has to be able to sit in the trap without flowing downstream. Just like a P-trap, the water actually has to sit in there. So it has to be deep enough for it to sit in there. If it's not deep enough, if it's smaller than the diameter of the pipe, then it's essentially useless. It'll just be acting as a pipe, and it'll just flow down, and it'll be empty, which is useless. This problem happens sometimes because in certain buildings and certain applications, these air conditioner units are in the ceiling. And the ceiling will be have a certain amount of space in there, and it's really tight. So you have to, you barely have enough room to put a deep trap in there, and to slope however far you're going with this condensate line. So that problem sometimes arises. By the way, C could also be an answer, because not enough fall on the condensate line. Basically, if it's flat, then that could cause the problem too, because it could just be staying flat, water fills it up, and then backtracks into the pan and then overflows. So that could also be an answer, but it's just not as technically good of an answer. Story time. I had to do a service call on a leaking, their ceiling was leaking, and this was the problem. I had to go troubleshoot it, and I put my black gloves on, my rubber gloves on, and I couldn't see. I was having my flashlight up there, and then I could tell that where the pan was draining into the pipe, there was something blocking it or something. So I reach up, I grab something, and I feel water, and then a mouse, a dead mouse, just falls on the ground, like right in front of my face, and that was clogging up. That was clogging up the pipe. Question 7. A house has had the water meter changed, and the new water meter has a single direction of flow feature. The T&P valve begins to drip. In order to solve the drip problem, the fix would be to do what? Install an expansion tank, or replace the T&P valve, blow off the T&P valve, and install a pressure tank. Well, you definitely not install a pressure tank into your house. Now the T&P valve, both of these answers, B and C, that's not the problem that is leaking. It's not the temperature and pressure valve. So the T&P valve begins to drip. If it's dripping, it's supposed to drip. That is how you know it's working. It could be not working, but most likely the problem with the pressure in the system. In a house, hot water tanks would need an expansion tank. They don't always need them because a house is a small system and it doesn't have a ton of pressure, but sometimes this can solve the problem, is adding an expansion tank. That's the most likely answer, is that you need to add an expansion tank, and that will take up the excess pressure that's in the house, and it won't come out of the T&P valve. It'll be absorbed into the expansion tank and allow the T&P valve to drip less. That is the point of an expansion tank. Number 8. In order to ensure equal usage of each lateral in an absorption field, a blank should be installed. An effluent pump, a distribution box, a balanced header, or a sump pump. If you know what a sump pump is, it is definitely not a sump pump, because if it's talking about an absorption field, it's talking about a septic field, a septic tank. So there's no sump in that system. A balanced header, I don't even know what that is. So it's not that. If you did a process of elimination and you knew the knowledge that I knew, then that's what you would do. But if you've never heard of something and it doesn't sound like a technical term that you know, sometimes it could be that you just don't. There's a term that you just don't know. But sometimes these questions just throw in things that are just trying to trip you up. That's what C would be, a balanced header. So it's not those two. A distribution box or effluent pump. In order to ensure usage of each lateral in an absorption field. So it's to ensure equal usage of each lateral. If you knew how a septic system worked, it goes from the septic tank to the distribution box to the laterals. And the laterals are PVC pipes with holes at the bottom at a 45-degree angle. And from the distribution box, they're distributed evenly throughout the field. So anyway, the answer is distribution box. And that is just a knowledge thing. If you know that, if you know how a septic system works, then you know that answer. Effluent pump could be in there, but you really have to read the question carefully. In order to ensure equal usage of each lateral in absorption field, blank should be installed. And that is what the purpose of a distribution box is to ensure equal usage of each lateral. Number 9, medical gas piping is joined by being A, 95.5 soldered, B, brazed with an inert gas purge, C, soldered with nitrogen purge, D, brazed with oxygen purge. C, you don't usually solder and then do a nitrogen purge for anything. Usually if you're soldering, it's going to be domestic water. It's going to be drainage, but purges are for gas. So natural gas and propane and stuff like that, when you do those pipes, they need to be purged. And then medical gas needs to be purged as well. But you can cut out the two soldered answers immediately. And then it's between the brazed. And you got to know medical gas is always brazed. So that's another way you can eliminate the solder, just because medical gas is going to be always brazed. So if you know that, then you at least can narrow it down to 2. And then you just simply have to know that they purge medical gas with inert gas. And they purge it with an inert gas, not oxygen. Can't do it with oxygen. So the answer, okay, this is wrong. The answer is B, brazed with an inert gas purge. The size of a distribution field is determined by a blank. Percolation test, number of fixtures in the house, GPM rating of the effluent pump, or gravity flow test. I don't think there's such thing as a gravity flow test, so you can eliminate that like that. Number of fixtures in the house, that's a good idea. but it doesn't determine how often those fixtures would be flushed. So there's something you could do there. GPM rating at the effluent pump. This one you're going to learn in level 4 when you're doing wells and specialized plumbing systems and septic fields. But septic fields and septic systems, you're going to learn at level 4. The real answer is a percolation test. When you are designing a septic system, you test the soil that the field is going to be in. You have to give like a lab a sample of the soil, and they do a percolation test, and they do the test, and blah, 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 and they do some research, they do some science stuff, and they let you know details of what you're supposed to do. Basically, they're measuring how good soil is for crap and water seeping down into it. That's just the regulations that have to happen. The answer is percolation test. Number 11. What best defines a confined space is, number 1, an area with only one access and egress, an area where flammable gases are, an area not designed for continuous human occupancy, an area susceptible to flooding. Everywhere is susceptible to flooding, an area where flammable gases are. What does that really mean? If it's in a building, that could be a whole giant room. Like, it doesn't have to be a small space. So that's ambiguous. B is ambiguous. A, an area where with only one access and egress. You could have a ginormous room. The real answer is C, an area not designed for continuous human occupancy. That's the technical definition of it. Technically, it doesn't matter how small it is or what weird area it's in. A crawl space could technically be not for continuous human occupancy because humans aren't supposed to be down there. So that's one. It has one access and one egress, but the main factor is that humans are supposed to be down there. The point is you have to memorize that. So that's just the thing that you will know or you won't know. In the Red Seal exam, there's 7 different subjects, and that one is in occupational skills. And that has to do with safety and procedures, and like there's a whole aspect to the trade where you have to know what you're responsible for and what you're not, where everything falls under, who's under each jurisdiction and what is under each jurisdiction. That's under that category. Number 12, using ultraviolet disinfection of turbid well water, a blank should be installed. This is a hard subject. This is the worst subject that I have. I believe this was level 4. So if you're not at level 4 yet, you most likely won't know this answer. The answer is 5 micron filter. Now, you will go through water purification. That's a whole chapter in level 4. And that's where you'll learn about water softeners, purification systems, and all this stuff. Number 13, the balancing valve is located blank on a VAV box reheat coil. So where on the system is a balancing valve located? Is it located on the supply connecting upstream of the control valve, on the supply connecting downstream of the control valve, on the return connection, balance or balancing valves not required on VAV boxes? It's a good rule just to know where a balancing valve goes, which is on the return piping, which is on the return connection. That is the answer. So balancing valves are always on the return connection. So if you're looking at a VAV box, or you're trying to put one in there in the first place, or if you see one, that is going to be the return connection. If it's not, then someone made a mistake. Number 14, a blank is used to ensure the correct amount of water is being delivered to each branch of device. A control valve, a ball valve, a balancing valve, or a check valve. Check valve is basically a one flow valve, a one direction flow valve. So it doesn't allow water to go the opposite direction. So it's not that one. So you got to know your valves. So that's what a check valve does. A ball valve opens and closes. And that's all it does. So it's not that one. What is used to ensure the correct amount of water is being delivered to each branch of device? Balance is being delivered to each branch of device. So it's going to be a balance valve. That's really just a definition thing. That's what a balancing valve does. That's the purpose of it, is to make sure all the fixtures are getting the equal amount of flow. Number 15, when it comes to the piping downstream of a reverse osmosis water purification system, blank piping materials should not be used. When you hear reverse osmosis water purification system, you're going to think acidic water. So after it goes through the process, it's going to be acidic. So this is saying the piping downstream of this system. So if you haven't hit level 4 yet in school, in your plumbing apprenticeship, this will be in level 4. So let's go through the answers. A is going to be polypropylene, which is plastic. The second one is going to be copper pipe, everyone knows copper pipe, or stainless steel, or cross-linked polyethylene. So the top and bottom, A and D, are plastic. Now, if you've ever been in a hospital, if you ever noticed this, well, all the drainage will be cast, everything will be cast, and then in certain places, they need to change the material of the drainage to be plastic because what's coming through is going to be highly acidic, and it will rot through the cast iron. So if you've never seen that, then I'm just telling you now. But I've been at a site before where everything's cast iron, and there's certain areas where they use PVC or even walled blue brute. I know blue brute is for water supply usually. They do that for like blood and stuff, and I guess anything else in the hospital that's dumping down nasty stuff like that into a system. It'll eventually rot the cast iron away way faster than it does plastic. Plastic is a lot more immune to acidic materials. So plastics are more good with acid than metals, so you can cut those out. Stainless is also pretty good with acids and is not the answer either. And so when it comes to the piping downstream of a reverse osmosis water purification system, some piping materials should not be used. So what is it that should not be used? The answer is copper. Out of those 4 answers, copper is the one that would eat away the fastest. And that's just the truth. Even with water, copper will get pinholes and corrode, but especially with acid, it would get eaten through quite fast. Number 16, contractor must dig a 30-foot long, 3-foot wide, and 6-foot deep trench in grade 2 soil in freezing conditions. No shoring is available for use. Length of backfill will have to be delivered backfill the trench. So this contractor is just digging a rectangular prison, essentially, in freezing conditions. Freezing conditions doesn't matter. That is a distraction to the question. It makes no difference. Grade 2 soil also makes no difference because the question is asking for yardage. All the answers are in yards. That's another thing to keep in mind. All these answers are in yards, but the question gives you the measurements in feet. So you simply have to convert feet to yards before you get the answer. So you can either calculate cubic feet. You can either get the answer there and put the cubic feet answer and transfer that into cubic yards, which is just a mathematical formula, or change the feet as is right now in the question. 1 yard equals 3 feet. So it's going to be 10 foot long by 1 foot wide by 2 foot deep. And so when you calculate that up, that equals 20 cubic yards. You just got to read the question carefully there. And then when you're on your red seal exam, you get a formula sheet. And to be honest, you should memorize a ton of these formulas anyway, just to make it easier. So that's that one. It's pretty simple, but you just got to not get tripped up on the units. Feet versus yards. Number 17. Septic tank contents are delivered to an elevated absorption field by a sump pump, 2 bell siphon, 3 effluent pump, D gravity. So this is part of a septic system, so it's definitely not a sump pump or a bell siphon. Effluent literally means sewage. That looks good to me. The answer is effluent. That's just what it is. That's what it looks like. 18. On a 2-inch 150 psi flange, there are how many bolts? So this is a IPT pipe trades handbook question. So this little book here, I got the little version. There's a bigger version that people can get, and it has like a spiral bound one. That's a little bigger, but this is the same book. It's about $50 on Amazon. I'm sure other places, but you should get this for sure. The answer for this one is on page 230. There's a chart here, and it's on page 230. And essentially, it has everything about flanges, every single size of flange, every single pressure rating of flange, every single number of bolts about flanges, and it has charts for everything. When you go to 2-inch nominal pipe size, to number of bolts, you go to 4. It also has the pressure rating which is going to be max 150 psi flange. This book does have a lot of things that aren't in the code book. They're kind of like not common knowledge practices, they're just good knowledge practices. Some questions in the Red Seal are straight out of this book. This book is important. If you've never heard of this book, you should get it even before you get to level 4, before you're even ready, or just get it. But if you go to the 150 psi chart, you go to the 2-inch, and you just match it just like any chart. 2-inch size, then you go to the number of bolts, match them, and it's 4. That is the answer. The answer is an IPT typing trades handbook. And there's a flange. Number 19, the minimum depth of lead in an 8-inch lead and oakum cast iron hub and spigot joint is how much? So there's a code clause for this, and everyone knows that lead and oakum is an ancient technology that you might run into, but you most certainly won't be doing it. So there's a code clause. You just look up in the code book. If you look up 2.3.2.1 sentence 2, you'll find the answer, which is 25 millimeters, which is 1 inch. So if you've never seen it before, this is what lead and oakum looks like. You might run into it. It's super old. Maybe if you're in an old city, there'll be a lot of this. But this will be open, and then you heat up the lead and then pour it into this area right there, which you're seeing it on the diagram here. That's what it is. Never seen it before? That is lead and oakum. Number 20. The minimum distance from the edge of a trench excavated soil should be piled at how far away? How far away from the edge is safe? So the answer to this, I believe, is in the National Building Code. It's not anywhere, but this is going to be part of your occupational skills, something you got to memorize, and it's for safety reasons. And the answer is 1,000 millimeters or 1 meter. There's the diagram there where everything piled up near that trench has to be 1 meter away. You can't fall into them. If you don't know about trenches, if you've ever worked in trenches or been around them, on the job site, you should be really careful. This thing is called shoring. So this is a structured steel thing that helps this whole thing not collapse and kill the person that's working down here. So if you're on a site, I remember I was on the site and a bunch of, our site was finishing. A whole bunch of guys were moving to one site. We were going to go do groundwork. And our supervisor rounded us all up, and he was like, hey, you told us about this. And I had no clue about this. I'm sure some other guys knew what it was. But he was basically like, hey, someone tells you to go in a trench hole that doesn't have shoring, tell them to kick rocks. Just, in BC, we have the right to refuse unsafe work. I'm sure it's across Canada. And just for your life, you should just refuse unsafe work. Just don't go in there, because you can die, and it'll happen faster than you think. You might want to just go do something real quick, but that's how people die. And like if you might it doesn't even have to be that tall. You could be taller than the trench, but if a whole bunch of dirt collapses in, it's just simply heavier than you and stronger than you, and you will not be able to escape it. It'll just crush your legs or crush half your body, or just bury you without a thought in the world. So anyway, that's a little bit on shoring. I went a little bit extended on that just because I wanted to talk about shoring. But the rule, the minimum distance from the edge of a trench excavated soil should be piled up, should be 1 meter away, 1,000 millimeters away. 1 meter is roughly 3 feet. Now, number 21, a waterlogged expansion tank on a hydronic heating system would result in increased chemical usage, pressure relief valve discharge, increased makeup water, or all of the above. An expansion tank is waterlogged. It is no longer absorbing the extra pressure in the system. So water's gonna be banging around a lot more. It's just gonna be more turbulence. So if you think about all these answers, it's gonna all correct. So it's gonna be all the above. So increase in makeup water, pressure relief valve discharge, increased chemical usage, these will all go up and will all happen because of a waterlogged expansion tank that is essentially not working. It's going to be higher pressure in the system than normal. Number 22, in order of direction of flow, blank must be installed on the discharge line of a sewage pump. So it's saying shut off valve, union, check valve, or union, shut off valve, check valve, or union, check valve, shut off valve, or union, check valve. So I don't have a picture for this, but it is good for you to think of it in a picture. So think of a direction of flow. So the water is going this way. The water is going past the union, past the check valve, past the shutoff valve, or it's going past the union and past the check valve, right? Number one, there's gonna be a shutoff valve. So this, you can just exit. Now number A here, this shutoff valve, union, check valve is just gonna be the wrongest there is. So imagine water is flowing in this direction here, and the pump is here. The union is always going to be closer to the thing it's isolating. And then the shutoff valve is going to be on the other end of the check valve, but it's blocking off everything from the system. So it's going to be shutoff valve protecting from the system. Because then in this direction here, imagine this is how it's going to work correctly. Shut off the valve, and that's the system in that direction. And you have the union here, and you can open up that union, and everything is fine. If you're over here, you shut off this valve, then you open up the union, and that check valve is just sitting there doing nothing / doing a job it's not supposed to be. You open up that union, shut off this valve, the water is all up in this system, and it's pushing back against this check valve, and the check valve might be acting as an isolation valve. It's not the point of a check valve, so that's incorrect. And then there's with the shut off valve in the middle, and it's just not going to be in the middle. It's always going to be on the end of the valve train. So the answer is this right here. It's going to be union, check valve, and then shut off valve. Number 23, when the flushometer is at rest, the pressure relationship between the top side of the flushometer diagram and the underside of the diagram is that it has these three scenarios. Bottom pressure is equal to top pressure is less than, bottom pressure is greater than top pressure, or the top pressure is greater than the bottom pressure. So when this is at equilibrium, the flushometer is chilling, it's at rest, nothing is moving. There is a spring in there, keeping the diaphragm pushed up so that everything is closed. Answer is going to be that the bottom pressure is equal to top pressure. Now I have a picture here that explains it a little better. So when you pull this handle, this little handle pin pushes up this relief valve, pushes it up, it opens up so that water is able to flow from the top to the bottom. Now there is where you have the pressure differential, and because of the pressure differential, water is flowing. So the flow is coming here, as water is flowing through and going out. So when you let go of this handle, this whole diaphragm assembly will slowly start to close. It'll start to head back down and seat itself so that no more water can come in. And when it does that, everything will stop moving, everything will fill with water, and the pressure is equalized. But this handle is what causes the pressure differential in this whole system. This is just understanding how it works. That is what happens with flushometer. There's a couple chambers in here. When you pull the handle, it creates a pressure differential. When it stops, pressure in all of them is equal. Number 24. In a multi-dwelling building, the drain valve in an upfeed riser is located A. Upstream of the isolation valve, downstream of the isolation valve, C. Below the isolation valve, and D. At the connection to the main. So where is the drain going to be? So with anything, the drain is going to have to be downstream of the isolation valve. The point of a drain is just that, is to drain a system. I mean, you could open a drain up and get some water from it. But the main point of it is to drain a system dry. So it's going to have to be downstream of the isolation valve. Water source, where it's coming from, is a water supply, which is the city, most likely. If your drain valve is on the upstream side of the isolation valve, you're going to be trying to drain the city, which is not possible, or at least will take an extremely a long time. Here in this question here, you need to know the definition of upstream and downstream. Downstream is simply downstream, as with the flow. Just like a river, you go downstream. Let's go downstream. That's what it means, with the flow. Upstream is like a fish swimming upstream. So it's opposite direction of flow. So that's the main thing here in this question. Now, C, below the isolation valve, that's ambiguous because a pipe could be vertical or horizontal, and beneath it is relative in that situation. At the connection to the main, what does that mean? That's vague too. If you knew what upstream and downstream meant, if you know what a drain valve is, this is a simple question. A blank backflow preventer is required for premise isolation of a single family dwelling. A DUC, a DCAP, a DCVA, or a DCAPC. Now, these are all different backflow preventers. You will learn that in level 3 when you do your backflow. This one also is just simply knowing it and recognizing it. Like you might have seen this in your house. The answer is a DCAP is a dual check with atmospheric port, and this is what it is, and this is what it looks like. A DCBA is going to be maybe for bigger applications, or commercial dishwashers, stuff like that, but it's not going to be for your house. That is the answer to that. So that's another one of these answers that you just have to kind of memorize. If you have no clue what a backflow preventer is or premise isolation, hope you know what a single family dwelling is. But the answer there is a DCAP. That's always going to be the answer for premise isolation for a house or a single family home. Premise isolation is isolation for the entire building. This DCAP is protecting the entire building. And that is the end. So no matter how bad or how lost you felt in these last 25 questions, just do it until you ace it. Hit me up in the comments if you want a set of questions to do and just practice, because you just need to practice to pass it basically. Essentially, that's the key. Practice it and then improve slowly and surely, and study a lot. The hardest part about the Red Seal exam is that it's crammed into 6 or 7 weeks. The hardest part is the time, because you have to do a certain amount of weeks of new content, and then you have to review gas, and then you review the entire last 4 years of your entire apprenticeship. And that's just the only hard part, is how much time you don't get. So if you start when you're out of school, if you start beforehand and review all your other levels, you will get a huge upper hand, and that is the most surefire way to help yourself pass this exam. Anyway, happy studying, good luck, peace.